Hi, I'm Paul James, the designer and product manager of the IrriGRAY system for water renew. So the first settings we want to change on a new installation in our configuration is climate and water. Now how I got here was to log in, selected the installation, selected the configuration that I want to make my changes to, although they will be saved as a new configuration as discussed in the previous video. Climate and water is a series of settings that are used throughout the IrriGRAY system by every zone. It comprises of your location, so we know what the climate is, whether you have water restrictions for the use of potable water, whether it be sprinklers or through drip irrigation. What should happen if you have too much grey water? What should happen if you have freezing conditions? If you don't have enough grey water during the day, and therefore the system adds make-up water at the end of the day, what time should the end of the day be? So let's start at the top and change our location from what is currently marked as Houston in Texas to El Paso. Before I make the change, have a look at the August value, which is currently 6, under the Historical ET Values heading. ET stands for evapotranspiration and is the amount of irrigation water required by a plant to grow effectively as a crop. When I change it from Houston to El Paso, it shifts from 6.08 to 8.94. That's an increase of 3 inches per month. Not unexpected. Houston is in a moist environment close to the coast, and El Paso is in one of the hottest locations and driest areas of Texas. Now let's say instead we were in California, and more states are being added all the time. Instead of selecting a city or county, California has broken up the region of California into 13 zones. They're called CIMAS zones, and they define how much water is required in each area. If we were to zoom in on Santa Barbara, and let's say that the installation was in this location here, near where I've got the mouse moving around, that's zone 3. Zones start getting larger as we head up the back hills and into the mountains behind Santa Barbara, which are higher, drier, and hotter. Zone 3 information is published on the map, but it's already included automatically in IrriGRAY. So let's go back to IrriGRAY. I'm going to say that it is CIMAS Zone 3. So unlike El Paso in Texas, which needed close to 9 inches of irrigation per month in August, Zone 3 only needs just over 5 inches. Clearly it's a more pleasant environment. Now, instead of using historical ET values, we could instead use live weather. The CIMAS zone maps rely on historical data from CIMAS weather stations. Those weather stations also put out ET or evapotranspiration rate values every night. IrriGRAY automatically grabs those values and can calculate your irrigation requirements based on real weather. Now, unless you're right next to an actual weather station, maybe it's better that you can select data from 3 different weather stations and give them relative weight. So for example, we're looking at Santa Barbara. Now this list is quite long. The primary sort on this list is the end of the line, basically being the county or location. So if I scroll down to Santa Barbara, I'm going to put it near the top of the list, right there. I can select 3 different stations, or up to. Do the same again. I know the area. I'm actually going to choose 2. So I'm going to change this last value to 0, and I would like the central Santa Barbara station to have a 60% effect and the Santa Ynez station to have a 40% effect. Now, it still may not be quite right. These stations could be down near the coast, and you could be 300 or 400 feet higher up, slightly into the hills out of Santa Barbara. In which case, if you decide you need a little more, you can push up the increase. I'll mark it here. Increase or decrease values. If you want to do it finally, just use your arrow key to move it 1%. So the next decision to be made is whether to use excess grey water. Now, in very dry locations, which don't get into very cold conditions in winter, such as San Diego, most people there will just say, I want to use every drop of grey water I have year-round. And that's not a problem at all. But once you start moving further north, and especially inland, into, let's say, northern Texas or northern Arizona, you don't need as much grey water in winter. So what should happen to it? Now, firstly, during the hot months, as shown here, March through to October, you probably want to use it all the time. It's only November, December, January and February when you may have an issue. The next point is, what should happen when it freezes? Now, if we looked at a situation such as Tucson in Arizona, it very rarely snows there. It's very hard to get a hard freeze. They may get exceedingly low temperatures for one night, and those temperatures will last until, say, the middle of the day at worst. In that case, there's no risk in actually irrigating during those low temperature conditions. However, let's say that you're in a hard freeze area. You will want the system to start protecting itself, say at 35 degrees. You want the filter to put itself into freeze protect position and stay there until the weather has warmed up enough, particularly if you have exposure to snow. The issue being that if it has frozen and the system's in self-protect position, all the pipes are empty. But if snow falls during that weather period, you don't want to irrigate again until the snow has melted. In which case, you normally would wait until the temperature has reached 50 degrees to clear that freezing condition. You can unclick freeze to waste. And this is about, I still produce grey water during the freeze, what do I do with it? Normally it would go to waste. If you unclick this, it allows the grey water to be sent to freeze capable zones. And that's covered in the video about zones. For now, I'm going to leave this checked. So now we move on to water restrictions. If you have potable water restrictions in your area, and they're becoming far more common with drought, you need to set them here. There are two different areas that could be covered. The first one is potable water sprinkler use. And the most common methods of restricting water is to choose day per week, days per month. So you can set them here. There are other areas that say even within those days, you can only use a certain amount of potable water per month. An example is Lubbock, sometimes in Texas. Sometimes they say you can only use a maximum of 2 inches per month, and you're allowed to do it up to 4 days in that month. In that case, you would select the 4 days in the checklist and also put in the 2-inch amount. Although uncommon, some areas are starting to regulate the use of potable water through drip line. This has some impact on grey water zones, particularly make-up water. So if you didn't have enough grey water during the day and you needed extra potable water at the end of the day, these restrictions could impact IrriGRAY. Let's pretend that there are some restrictions. What IrriGRAY does is calculates the shortfall in how much water it didn't get. So let's say it needed 100 gallons today for a zone, and there was only 60 gallons of grey water. Normally it would require 40 gallons of potable water, but because there is a restriction, it can't do that today. It remembers it is 40 gallons short. So the next day, it tries again. It does the grey water. If potable water is still not allowed on that day through drip, it'll probably be another 40 gallons, so now it's short 80 gallons. The day after, which has permitted the use of potable water in the drip irrigation system, it will do the grey water, whatever is missing from that day, and let's say it was 20 gallons. Well, this time it will go add up my 20 gallons for today, 40 gallons missing from yesterday, so now it's 60 gallons, and then 40 gallons missing from the day before. So it will add 100 gallons because of the potable water restrictions. And that is the relevance of this question here. Apply extra water on permitted days. The standard answer is yes. If you say no, it ignores the missing water from previous days. You can change what time the make-up water supply starts. For most households, almost all activity has stopped by 10 o'clock at night in terms of washing machines and showers. However, perhaps your family stays up late and they're still running the washing machine or taking late showers. You could change this to 11 o'clock. Or perhaps you're a household that finishes everything by 8. In any case, you can change it to what you want. The next one is related to rainfall. It's very hard to just select a certain area of the screen and highlight it in blue. Here you can change the number of hours delay there is in potable water irrigation, whether it be for makeup or zones that only have potable water and no grey water. Keep in mind that your rain sensor already has a bit of a delay built into it. Rain sensors have little leather style washers in them that get heavy when they get wet. As they start to dry out, those washers get lighter and the switch turns itself off. Typically, the washers will reactivate themselves after about, depends on how wet they are, but between 4 to 12 hours later. This 24-hour period, as default, is in addition to that delay built into the rain sensor. You have a master switch at the bottom which says, I don't want to have make-up water at all, which would be off, or leave it as normal and make-up water is added at the end of the day. So that's it for climate and water. Our next video should be zones.